According to a Denver Post review of thousands of pages of financial reports, and let's lay the groundwork here. PERA is the Public Employees Retirement Association. Okay, so this provides retirement benefits for a number of public employees, and it has a giant liability. And we're going to get into this in a second. But they've been reviewing thousands of pages. The Denver Post has been reviewing thousands of pages of financial reports, hours of public meeting recordings, found that state lawmakers and the petition board alike ignored numerous red flags about the landmark pension reform that was passed in 2010. So, Senator Lundberg, you kind of mentioned that there was a reform effort in 2010. But there was a lot of concern about that reform effort. Opting time and time again for public expediency at the expense of the Public Employees Retirement Association's long-term financial health. Now, PERA is barreling, this is the words of the Denver Post, towards its second watershed moment in a decade. PERA has only 58.1% of the money it owes in future retirement checks. Its funding gap has ballooned to $32.2 billion by one accounting measure, $50.8 billion by another. 1 in 10 Coloradans is a member of PERA and will be affected by what you all decide to do with regards to PERA. The state treasurer has a seat on the board of PERA. What are your ideas for solving this problem? And I'll give 2 minutes for this answer. So do you want to start, Bernard?
So first of all, one of the things that I did in looking at pension programs, there are states around the country that are almost fully funded, that are actually in pretty good shape. And those states are it's a heterogeneous mix. It's like Oregon, Tennessee, New York, Wisconsin. What those states do, and this kind of goes to Justin's bill, is those states have boards that have a minority, not a majority, but a minority of plan members on the board. They also have, on average, a lot more finance and economics expertise. As a Democrat, this is one thing that I think has been status quo. The Democrats haven't stood up and said that this board isn't, hey, they aren't doing such a great job. We need more finance and economics expertise on this board, first of all. The other thing, again, that I would get back to is that we have not been giving teachers raises, and instead we keep promising them benefits. And we've got to live up to this promise. And then the last thing I'd say, and that's near and dear to my heart, I volunteered, you'd find it out, for Colorado Care. I think we need to, healthcare costs have been eating away at the state government, eating away at personal pocketbooks, eating away, it's this wrecking ball. And I think we've got to deal with that as well. And if we deal with that, restructure the board, we'll be in much better shape. Thanks.
Representative Everett.
Thank you, Jeff. So a couple issues. I mean, first and foremost, when we look at solutions, we have to have transparency. I mean, you heard what Jeff just said. They had to look through thousands and thousands of pages of documents to get to the bottom of what they think is the problem. So one of the bills that I am running again this year, that we had 45 people show up to testify against last year, is really open up the books, allow the people on the board to actually see the books. I think that's step one, is transparency, so we can see how deep and how wide it is. Number two is reforming the board. You cannot have the fox watching the hen house. In fact, I remember back in 2001, after we'll just call it the internet bubble burst, where people were sounding alarms on PERA. So we're looking at compounding what's happened and not solving the problem back then, to where we may actually, and I may be the only person that will say this, and it might get me in trouble, especially if you're expecting PERA, to where we're so far in trouble potentially to where we may have to cut benefits that may just be more than a COLA freeze, a cost of living freeze for current retirees. And that's unfortunate, but that's the political reality and the reality that we have, because we want that check to show up, or that direct deposit to show up in your mailbox or in your account. So I think it's hugely important. But we have to see what the actual numbers are before we propose solutions. And you'll hear just what we've all been able to glean from what other pension systems have done, like sort of spreading it across instead of your best 3 years, where you're going to take all of your years of service under PERA. Things like that sort of lower the base and adjust the actuary tables to see what the payouts are, because most people are in the defined benefit plan. So first and foremost, transparency. Second, we need to change the board. Third, then we can work on the solutions.
Great. Representative Lawrence.
Thank you, Jeff. This is a big topic of conversation and has been for quite a while. Our former executive director of PERA, who unfortunately passed away suddenly this year, when he would come in to talk to us about what was going on with PERA, As I said, I have worked with union pensions for 30 years. They made the same promises that PERA is making to their retirees. So I kept asking them, you're promising 8%. Where are you getting that year over year? How many of you out there get 8% year over year on your investments? Ooh, that's awesome.
Talk to you later.
Yeah, well, I want to know who your investment advisor is. For the most part, that's an unrealistic number, and it should have been lowered quite a while ago. But there are some things that need to be done. But first and foremost, for those retirees who are retired in the system and near retirement, they have PERA. They do not have Social Security. This is the promise that the state made to them, and we need to make sure that that promise is kept. But again, for folks who are not vested, meaning they haven't worked in the system for at least 5 years, it's going to look very, very different. The retirement age has to increase. You can't mathematically collect retirement for a longer period of time than you worked in the system. And that benefit package that right now is based on your top 3 years, that has to go out to at least your top 10 years and maybe your entire career to make it realistic. There's a lot of different things that can change in that, but if the state is going to continue to promise a retirement system, we need to make the changes to make sure that promise can be kept going forward.
Great. Thank you. Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Jeff. Boy, so many things come through my mind on this particular issue. It is a big job for the treasurer to keep an eye on this, and being a board member, you know, he's got a front row seat on this. But let me reiterate what I'd said earlier, and that is that it's up to the state legislature to set the policies at the right level. So I believe the treasurer needs to work with the legislature to find these solutions, and you're hearing the solutions. It amounts to some as some people call it, haircuts in a lot of places. I was talking with a friend of mine who's the chairman of the pension committee for the Texas House, who actually tackled this for a couple of pensions in Dallas and Houston last year. He said sum total they were about $60 billion underfunded. And he said, we got it done. It was the toughest thing I ever did in the legislature, and there were only a few death threats, but we got it done. Well, it's a tough job. It's going to take leadership that insists on getting the job done. And it's not unique to Colorado. I was on the phone with Jonathan Williams. He's the chief economist for the American Legislative Exchange Council just this afternoon, discussing this very point of how do we fix PERA. He wanted to know how we were doing in Colorado. And I told him, well, I think we're headed the right way. I'm not sure we're going to get there this year. And I know that the state treasurer, whoever they are, is going to have a big job ahead of them still. And again, you're going to hear all of the solutions here because it's, in a sense, it's simple math, but in another sense, it's really a political question. Who can exert the leadership necessary to actually get us across the finish line?
Great. Thank you. Charles?
Thank you. Yeah, I think obviously the first thing that we need to do is balance the board and get a better mix so that, so we can work on solutions. Because yes, while it's the legislature's responsibility, we need a board that's going to respond to the changes that are necessary. And in thinking about that, and we go back and look at 2010 and what went wrong there, because there's a disagreement whether they didn't do the right thing or did. Well, the main problem in 2010 is that one, they said, here's what we need, okay, we'll phase it in, and then there was no mechanism to adjust on an annual basis. So here we are 2018 in more serious trouble than we were in 2010. So I think definitely whatever solution comes up has to be something that can be ongoing. It has to be so that this is what we need today, and there's no phase in. I mean, if you need that today, that's what needs to be today. And that's why I think one of the words that they used was it needs to be shared responsibility. Rather than everybody pointing their fingers at, well, it's their fault, their fault, their fault. I mean, we all have to come up with a solution. It doesn't really matter whose fault it is. Thank you.
Great. Mr. Watson.
Well, first of all, I would say that this is not a partisan issue. It shouldn't be a partisan issue. This is a people issue. My sister's a school teacher up in Erie, and she's working hard every single day, and she's depending on this. And it's not only 600,000 people that are affected by this, it's a whole lot more. You see, each one of these people who are getting this retirement are living in small towns and communities all throughout our state. And they're spending money at the grocery store, at the movie theater, and it has a ripple effect. So it's not just these 600,000, it's an entire state. I recently was with Americans for Prosperity, and the estimate is throughout our country that these different retirement programs are unfunded between $1 to $6 trillion with a T. Yes, we're at 32 billion, but this is a problem around our country. And I really believe Colorado can be the solution for it. I think it starts with positive leadership. Yes, the treasurer is one person on this board and one voice. But everything I've been doing throughout my career is about building bridges and tearing down barriers among people. The people on the other side of that table on that board, they have kids. They know someone who's depending on this retirement. First and foremost, build a relationship with them. Listen to their ideas and figure out how collectively we can get the ball across the finish line. Secondarily, I would say it's about transparency and education. Sadly, most of the people on the PERA board are not financial experts. These are not the people that you would go and trust your personal retirement with. They're well-intended people, but they're not necessarily financial experts. And so I think having somebody on that board that can help to educate them and explain that process. Personally, for me, I don't do investments without a double-digit return. Now, granted, that's not for the state of Colorado. First and foremost, you need to be a good steward and be conservative with the people's funds. But at the same time, the third point would be asset allocation. I think it's unacceptable that you're looking for a 1% return. We should look at the entire portfolio and say, okay, this small piece of the portfolio could get a reasonable and conservative double-digit return, but the most of it has to be conservative. Thank you.
Great.